Hi everyone, I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Reese.
And this is Charismatic Megafauna Corrections. So we're going to start with corrections from our marketing episode. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I didn't have any corrections for that one. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about breakfast being good or bad. I read a bunch of more articles and came to the exact same conclusion, which is we don't know.
We don't know if it's good or bad.
We have no idea. Basically, the consensus was eating a balanced breakfast is generally a good thing because it ups your energy in the morning, it jumpstarts your metabolism. But there are a lot of people who are concerned about like cereals, because cereals have super high sugar content most of the time. These studies a lot of times are put out by the food industry as well. So if you see something that says breakfast is the best thing for you to eat, it's probably sponsored by Kellogg or something like that. Or if you see something that says breakfast is out, dinner is in, it's probably sponsored by some company that produces dinner food.
Yeah. I also feel like that phrase, part of a balanced breakfast, it can be misleading. I don't think this is an original idea at all, but
no.
But it's misleading in that you can pretty much put anything together as long as there are enough items. You can put them all together, and anything can be part of a balanced breakfast.
Right. So the general consensus is that there's limited evidence that supports or refutes breakfast and supports and refutes the health of breakfast. A lot of studies say that eating breakfast helps to jumpstart your mind and you can concentrate better. A lot say that it's tied to obesity. But really, what you should do is whatever works for you. So if you wake up and you're hungry, eat food. If you wake up and you're not hungry, don't eat food. In general, avoid a lot of added sugars. Just try to eat nutritious foods.
Yeah. Good advice. Is that your only correction for this episode?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't have any corrections. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about breakfast.
Okay. It's kind of the same for me for this episode. I didn't really have corrections, but I didn't go too in-depth in terms of what the exams were for the Dunning-Kruger tests. And I wanted to highlight that now because I think that kind of sheds some light on what we were talking about at the time. So the proficiency exams there were 4 exams. The first was humor. The second was logical reasoning. The third was grammar. And the fourth was sort of part 2 of the grammar test, where we get a lot of the important information about the Dunning-Kruger effect. This phase is just called It Takes One to Know One. So humor is a 30-item questionnaire, and it asks participants to assess jokes from people like Woody Allen, Al Franken, and, in quotes, by the way, really silly pet jokes by Jeff Rovin. And participants are supposed to rate them from 1 to 11.
I got to be honest with you. I'm having less faith in Dunning-Kruger right now.
Well, that was my thought too. But apparently here's what they did. They brought in a panel. Maybe this isn't quite scientific enough for you either. But they brought in a panel of like 12 comedians or something as a control group to assess the quality of the jokes.
I think humor is so subjective that you can't count humor as related to intelligence.
I think you could make that argument, but I also think there's probably, and I read a little bit on this subject in their report, and it seems like they were looking for common identifiers, things that resonated with certain percentages of the population. I think that was a factor. So even though humor is completely subjective, there are elements that make certain jokes good, quote unquote, and certain jokes not as good.
Okay.
So
I'm not sold.
Okay. All right. Well, the second test was logical reasoning. That was a 20-item logical reasoning test with material taken from the LSATs. So a little more official.
All right. I'll sign off on that one.
Yeah, this is also part of, when I read the humor one, I was like, well, yeah, comedy is subjective. After looking at the standards for the rest of these tests, I'm like, okay, maybe they knew what they were doing for the first test too. Grammar was, so the first phase of the grammar exam, it was a 20-item grammar test with questions taken from the National Teacher Exam Prep Guide using the American Standard for Written English. So again, pretty official.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Now, the second phase of that part of the study, after they had some of the subjects come back in and they received information on how their peers performed in those same exams. And after they received that information, they were asked to reassess their own ability. So this is where a lot of the information and the data comes in terms of how people are in terms of quality, the quality of their assessing their own abilities.
So people are bad at assessing their own abilities.
Right. And by the way, they didn't just pull people off the street for this. From what I read in the study, it looks like primarily who they used were undergrads at Cornell at the time. So,
little Andy Bernards.
Yes, little Andy Bernards. So those are the four exams that they used for that to assess those skills. It kind of sheds some light on it gives you a background on the information, sort of the position that they were coming from and how they came to the conclusions that they did.
Were Dunning-Kruger Cornell associates?
I think so. I think it was through, let me pull up the exam. Yeah, so they were faculty at Cornell at the time, which makes sense.
Yeah, that's how you get access to all those tasty undergrads.
Yeah, I don't know why you said it like that. So yeah, that's what I have.
All right, shall we move on to our mammals episode?
Let's move on to the mammals episode.
So, if you remember, the mammals episode started out with a discussion about the dancing plague.
I do remember that, yeah, because that's kind of funny.
Yeah, hard to forget. I have two things about the dancing plague. The first of which, if you recall, there was a specific type of fungus that grew on the wheat that people made bread out of, and occasionally it would give people psychedelic trips.
Right.
I couldn't figure out how the fungus was pronounced. I said ergo or ergot. It is actually ergot.
Ergot?
Ergot.
Huh.
Which is nasty, and I just had to include it.
Yeah, that's terrible. I can never unhear that.
No,
Thanks.
It's icky. The other thing has nothing to do with the story, but was really just an anecdote that I said about the Greek guy who laughed himself to death. His name was Chrysippus.
Yeah.
And he was known as a Stoic philosopher. However, he told a joke and laughed himself into an aneurysm.
Oh my gosh. I think we all have extended family like that stoic uncle that never cracks a smile, but then tells a joke that he thinks is really funny and laughs for an hour.
It's one of those things that it makes the joke that much funnier.
It really does.
If a serious person tells it. But that's it. Everything else about the dancing plague was meticulously researched.
Right.
Because I was so interested.
That's a great topic.
The other things had nothing to do with the dancing plague, but they do have to do with the mammalian body. So we talked a little bit about animals that give live birth, and I just wanted to give a couple more examples. So animals that give live birth are called Nope.
Corrections. Save it for the corrections.
They're called something that I can spell but not say. Viviparous.
Viviparous.
It's something like that.
That's fun to say.
It is fun to say. Or, as I tried to say, But there are other animals that aren't mammals that do give live birth. Aphids are one, so an insect. Scorpions are also insects that give birth. And then, like I said in the original episode, sharks, there are a fair number of sharks that give birth to live animals, as well as snakes. Some snakes give birth to little baby snakes, which is a little icky.
That's gross. I don't like that.
It's just a mama snake with a bunch of little baby snakes poking out of her.
No.
It's very Medusa-like.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was the mammalian jaw musculature. So we talked about how the jaw muscles allowed for us to chew more effectively, and they also allowed for us to start suckling. But I was a little misinformed, and I don't think I understand it yet. So I'm going to give a general overview, but just know that I was a little bit wrong. So mammals have a really prominent zygomatic arch. So if you touch underneath your eye, you can feel there's sort of the bottom of the eye cavity. That's your zygomatic arch.
Okay.
Things like lizards don't really have one. Or if they do, it's not as prominent as ours is.
Okay.
So I was talking about how lizards' muscles are on the inside of their head and mammals are on the outside. That's not totally correct. We have some muscles along the outside of our jaw. So if you touch along the base of your jaw, back by your molars, you'll be able to feel some of those. But we also have muscles that go up underneath the zygomatic arch. It's the combination of all of these muscles that give us the ability to chew regularly, but also chew circularly. So if you think of an animal chewing their cud, that kind of thing is strict to mammals.
I'm immediately thinking of goats with like chewing with the dead rectangular eyes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's the combination of that musculature. With lizards, like I said, they don't really have that zygomatic arch. The way that muscles attach are different. We also don't know how the differences started because muscles don't usually fossilize. So we have these fossils that show mammalian-esque skulls, that show mammalian-like skulls, that have zygomatic arches, but we have no idea how the muscles attached.
So we're just sort of filling in the gaps at this point.
Right.
Similar to like dinosaurs with reptilian skin versus feathers kind of thing?
Right.
Okay.
We're really just guessing.
I believe it's called a hypothesis in science, Kels.
Educated guessing. But that's all I had for mammals. Again, meticulously researched.
I guess we're, I'm not too worried about it, but we're rapidly getting to a point where these are going to get shorter and shorter.
In case you missed that, if you're listening at home, our dog just let out the largest sigh because we are keeping him up and he wants to be napping.
Yeah, we are a huge inconvenience to this dog.
Anyways, as Reese was saying, we're getting better.
Yeah, I think we're getting better at our segments and doing more research beforehand versus afterwards.
Our pinnacle moment was when Reese thought jellyfish moved at 200 miles an hour.
I know, which was what, episode 1?
Yep.
I need to say more stupid stuff like that.
No.
Because it's not that I don't think stupid stuff like that. I just don't say it out loud on the podcast anymore.
Please say it out loud because I'm sure there are other people at home having the same thought. And if you say it out loud, it's not stupid, but we can address it.
Well, it is stupid, but it's it's fodder for our corrections episode at least.
There you go.
It serves a purpose. Cheers.
Would you like to do your corrections for our mammalian episode?
I would. So I had a few from this that are
Nice.
they're not really corrections, but they're sort of clarifications. So you asked, I kind of brushed over this in the episode, but you asked the first time, what is the ideal temperament mix? So there's if you remember, there are 4 fluids, and if they mix together correctly.
One of them's snot.
What? No. Nope. None of them are snot.
Phlegm. Mucus.
Okay.
It's snot.
Is it snot if it isn't in your nose, though?
It's snot-like.
I don't know why we're spending so much time defining snot. It's sure. We'll say it's phlegm/snot.
Thanks.
All right. So there's the 4 liquids, and depending on how those mix in your body, that determines your personality characteristics. So there are more ideal mixes of these fluids and less ideal mixes. So we talked a lot about the less ideal ones because they're the famous ones that give us all those psychological models. The ideal temperament mix, apparently there are a few versions of it, but it's basically just a balance of those four fluids.
Which makes sense.
Right, yeah. So here's how they categorize that balance, though. In the ideal personality, the complementary characteristics were exquisitely balanced among warm and cold and dry and moist.
Ew.
Yeah, it's hard for me to read. So that's a generalization. You can look into it more if you want to. Like I said, we'll link the Wikipedia article that I'm getting all my information from. But it's really, that is what it boils down to. Are they evenly balanced amongst one another? The second correction that I've got is the pronunciation of Galen, which you gave me crap for. It is, in fact, Galen. That's how you say it.
I don't recall giving you crap for it.
I know. We can listen to the episode. So yes, Galen was the philosopher / mathematician / all the other stuff that people were back in those days.
Renaissance men.
Renaissance men, pre-Renaissance.
Right.
It's pronounced Galen. We also talked about, I sort of breezed over this, that there is a test or a model that is used in the Myers-Briggs assessment, and that is actually the Keirsey Temperament Sorter, or KTS. Have you heard of that?
I have, but I've taken psychology courses. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. So the KTS is just a self-assessed personality questionnaire that is the basis of the Myers-Briggs model. That's all. I mentioned it briefly. I just wanted to get it out there because I think maybe you asked and I kind of brushed over it because I didn't really know. But that's it.
You know, typical.
If I don't know an answer, I don't want to, maybe I shouldn't show my hand here, but if I don't know an answer, usually I'll change the subject.
That's not the point of this podcast. We all have questions and we all want answers.
Yeah.
And if they're 2 weeks later, that's better than nothing.
Well, and again, it's going to lead me to say some stupid things that we can use later for our corrections episode.
Hit that like button if you think it's hilarious when one of us says something stupid.
Thank you for saying one of us.
I say stupid stuff sometimes. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure it happens.
Yeah. We'll go with that. Anyway, thank you for including yourself and not just putting me out there.
Yeah, I don't have any more corrections, though.
I do. I have one more.
Oh.
You asked me what the Myers-Briggs letters were.
Yes, I did.
And there are 8 of them, and I didn't know them off the top of my head in the episode. But what they are is E for extroversion, I for introversion.
And those are paired.
They're paired as in like opposite.
Right. You're either one or the other.
Exactly. Yep. And depending on what combination, you can fall under any one of 16 categories.
Right.
So the second one is sensing, S for sensing, N for intuition, then T for thinking, F for feeling, and finally J for judging and P for perceiving.
And what are you?
I don't know.
Oh.
Something. I'm some combination of those.
One of 16 combinations of those letters.
If I had to guess, I would say INFP.
That is correct. You are INFP.
Yeah, I thought so.
If you had to guess, what do you think I am?
No, I vaguely remember. I think you are an INTJ or INFJ, depending on the quiz.
That's also completely correct.
Nailed it. Well, almost nailed it.
Definitely didn't. Blow it.
Yeah, that's all I've got.
That's all I have as well.
This is a pretty short episode. Elroy, would you like to contribute anything?
He did have another big sigh.
Yeah, any mistakes you've made?
He's looking at us as if we have offended him deeply.
Well, that's just his face. As always, I'm Reese.
And I'm Kelsey.
And this is Charismatic Megafauna Corrections.